On July 3rd, 2017, a Canadian speedrunner by the name Jugo Mega achieved a world record in Super Mario Bros. 3. Or at least he thinks it was the record. Today, it sits all the way down at 72nd place on the leaderboard. How was this run surpassed by so many people in just a couple years? Well, it probably wasn't. Because this run stands on the any percent no wrong warp leaderboard, but its status as world record is only in the category kindly suggested by Jugo Mega himself. Any percent no glitching. So some sort of injustice is clearly happening here, where a guy works hard and achieves a great time but has gone completely unrecognized. There is nowhere he can post his time and see a shiny gold medal next to it. If he wants to run the game without using glitches, play it as intended just much faster, maybe that should be encouraged. After all, look at all the differences it creates, like this clip in Bowser's Castle which skips going down the stair section, and this oh, that's it. That would be the only distinction between no wrong warp and no glitches at all. Is that enough to justify splitting the categories? Speaking of speedrunning categories, what even are they? I mean, any percent and 100% are easy enough to understand, but what about warpless or no major glitches? What does any percent no up plus A mean? What about inbounds no SLA? What do GSR and IM/WW stand for? What does 11 exit? Screw that. What could Lunar Dragon possibly be? What is any percent no squoob? None of these make sense without highly esoteric knowledge, not even about the game itself, but specifically the speedrunning community built around it. The source of this confusing variety and inconsistency between games is that speedrunning is intrinsically a tug-of-war between wanting to play a game you love and wanting to break it. And much of this dissonance is centered around the flashiest and most divisive parts of speedruns, the glitches. From an outside perspective, using glitches might seem like cheating, but what isn't so obvious is the depth that they add to runs. After all, you can't just play the game how you always have, there have to be tricks and skips and techniques that are fun and challenging to learn, otherwise what's the point? Glitches actually create new gameplay opportunities on accident. But where's the limit? At what point does deviation from the intended methods make running a game an unrecognizable experience from walking it? How glitched is too glitched? Let's figure it out. To try and start answering this question, I did a bit of a survey, looking at the 100 most popular games on speedrun.com. Now, I'll admit this isn't a perfect sample, as it's biased towards games with low barriers of entry like piano tiles, which literally anyone watching this could submit a run for by the end of the video, but it's the best I could think of. For each of those 100 games, I looked at whether or not they have a glitchless speedrun category, a no major glitches category, banned specific glitches, and if any of those were relegated to miscellaneous or extensions pages. If any of those were present, I calculated the ratio of the number of glitchless players to any percent players. As you might expect, how games fit into those categories was kinda fuzzy. But I did my best, and here are the results. 17 games had categories explicitly banning all glitches, 28 had categories that were titled or seemed similar to no major glitches, 31 banned specific glitches like SMB3, and 6 only had such a category on an extended page, indicating its lesser importance within the community. All in all, 44 speed games had no categories which banned glitches in any way, meaning their players are essentially forced to use every possible tool available to be competitive, no matter what it is. Now, for piano tiles, this shouldn't be a problem at all, but could that be true for all 44 of them? What this demonstrates is that how different speed games interact with glitches varies wildly. There is no universal rule set, and there absolutely shouldn't be. To really understand the reasons for that, we'll need to dial it in a bit. I've picked out a good handful of games which I believe to be emblematic of why it shook out like this, each one offering a unique scenario. Let's start with a game clearly overloaded by categories, Super Mario World. It has 13 of them on the main leaderboard and another 52 hidden on the extensions page, but for brevity we'll only talk about these 4. From longest to shortest, 96 Exit requires clearing all 96 levels in the game, no Star World bans, of course, using the Star World which allows you to skip most of the game. 11 Exit requires completing the intended fastest possible route, and 0 Exit is pure any percent. So in 0 Exit, everything is fair game, even an arbitrary code execution glitch which warps the runner from the first level to the credits. The ACE is extremely impressive, and performing it quickly requires a ton of precision and dedication, but the result doesn't really look like Mario World. There's no cool platforming, no use of the cape to fly over everything, no ditching Yoshi for an extra boost. So to avoid this being the only way to experience runs, 11 Exit bans ACE, and it has far more players on the leaderboard as a result. Now, there is a major glitch central to 11 Exit, which is generating a cloud using chuck eating to speed up the Bowser fight. This effectively raises the skill ceiling of the category and skips the slow parts of a notoriously slow fight, so no one minds, but when it comes to the longer categories, it would be over-centralizing. Instead of experiencing the huge variety of cool levels the game has to offer, runners would have to constantly backtrack to generate items that would help them skip over future levels. So in No Star World and 96 Exit, chuck eating is banned. The SMW community values keeping glitches within levels. Essentially, these categories and their rules are structured around maintaining the experience of running the game more or less consistent with how it was originally played. Next, let's look at an indie hit released a couple years ago about climbing a mountain with a surprisingly deep message. I am, of course, talking about two games, Celeste and Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. Celeste was a game designed with speedrunning in mind, with a built-in timer and all. Its developers were even on the couch for its first appearance at a GDQ event. The rules for its any percent are interesting as well, because they specify all runs be performed on the current patch of the game. In its history, there have been glitches discovered and subsequently removed, such as menu storage, which was fixed entirely, or prologue skip, which was intentionally expanded from a frame-perfect trick with no good cue to being essentially free. So what about the people who want to play with those glitches? Well, there is a leaderboard for no patch restriction, under miscellaneous on the category extensions page, and there's only 6 players compared to any percent's 1100 plus. So for the most part, the community has left it up to the developers to make the call on what is and isn't in the speedrun. There are exploits they have left in, but really only ones which maintain the same skill set which was entirely intended by the creators. Running Celeste needs to feel like playing Celeste. The Getting Over It community similarly prefers their speedruns glitch-free, with the primary competitive category being titled glitchless and any percent not even being on the main leaderboard. It's really not too hard to see why, with the true world record being only 593 milliseconds. This speedrunning community values the mechanical skill of mastering the infuriating control scheme, as well as understanding the route taken, over simply seeing the end screen with the lowest time possible. So is that just it then? Do speedrunners simply want to have their runs feel like the game they're running? Let's not jump to that conclusion so fast. When thinking of incredibly broken speedruns, one of the first games that comes to mind is Portal. Hundreds of people have done speedruns of both this game and its sequel, resulting in some incredible records which are awesome to watch even if you don't know what's going on. I definitely don't. But what's interesting is that even with very similar mechanics and feel, the leaderboards of these two games have diverged when it comes to glitches. Portal 1 has out of bounds, inbounds no SLA, and glitchless. Each one has over 100 players, with glitchless just barely taking the crown as the most played category. Portal 2, on the other hand, has single player with in and out of bounds subcategories, single player SLA, and some co-op categories. Single player inbounds has over 250 players, and none of the other categories even approach that number. So, SLA stands for Save Load Abuse, and is a group of exploits which require, of course, abusing the saving system. They produce a lot of the game-breaking stuff visible in the runs, but are not the full extent of the glitches used in either game. The reason why Portal 1 has a full glitchless category, but Portal 2 only bans SLA, comes down to how the glitches specifically affect each run. Performing SLA tricks is by nature difficult and finicky. In the original, if you master them, you can just shatter the laws of physics and beat the game in under 7 minutes. In the sequel, they do not net nearly as much reward for the risk, but you still have all the frustration of attempting them, so most runners simply don't bother. Furthermore, perhaps due to better programming, perhaps random chance, the glitches discovered in Portal 2 are more subdued. For example, while the movement technique in Portal 2 gains speed linearly, the analog in Portal 1 gains speed exponentially. To have any sort of beginner-friendly category, glitchless is almost a must for P1. On the other hand, the main category for P2, while allowing plenty of glitches, remains centered around skilled movement and route knowledge. And the stuff that is unlocked with save abuse is just, subjectively, less interesting than what's in Portal 1. So we're still mostly at the same point. Communities want their runs to feel like playing the original game, but banning glitches isn't always necessary. In addition, glitch-heavy runs, depending on how they shake out, may be interesting or fun enough to be popular as well. If there's one game where everyone who played it briefly became a speedrunner, it's Mirror's Edge. Its gameplay is essentially parkour with added style. Naturally, there has been a thriving community for years of people who want to take this idea to its absolute limit. The two most popular categories are Any% and Glitchless, with Any% ultimately being the dominant one. And here's where I have to confront the inevitable point that how a glitch or an exploit is defined is not always clear. Black Belt Jinja Ninja has a great video covering this topic for ME in particular. Basically, the closer you look, the more the line between glitch and normal gameplay is blurred. Certain unintended mechanics are still allowed in glitchless because they don't cross a line whose exact position is arbitrary and subjective. Glitchless Mirror's Edge speedruns could just as easily be called No Major Glitches or some other name, and that's true for many other games as well. But since we're looking at the speedrunning community more holistically, we kinda have to just take those names at face value. While what is and isn't a glitch, and what should and shouldn't the category be called isn't always clear, there's still a reason why each category exists. Mirror's Edge Any% speedruns are crazy. It seems like any strategy that can be theorized can be done, and that leads the run well off the rails. Glitchless exists to provide a run less densely packed with difficult tech, with fewer confusing sequence breaks, but still maintaining a high skill ceiling and potential for growth. Instead of doing this, you can do this. Which is still pretty neat. Why then is it significantly less run than Any%? Because, and I have my sources on this, Any% is fun. For example, kick glitches, or KGs, are banned in glitchless but are a core part of running Any%. But they don't really feel like glitches when doing them, rather it's more like adding a new weapon to your free-running arsenal. Any% remains the primary category for Mirror's Edge in large part because the unintended mechanics only serve to enhance the core feeling of the original game, freedom of movement and expression. Why wouldn't you push that as far as you possibly can? And this isn't rare, where the glitch-filled mechanics become more appealing to the runners than the alternative. One example is a flourishing community from an unlikely source.
Are you ready, kids?
Aye, aye, Captain!
I can't hear you!
Aye, aye, Captain!
SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Despite a 70 on Metacritic, this game is a bona fide cult classic, with the speedrunning community at its heart. And the runs they've achieved are some of the most impressive you can find, filled to the brim with insane tricks and skips and clips and everything you can hope for in a broken as hell speedrun. Clearly, glitch usage is heavily encouraged in this community, with no such restrictions in the rule sets. Except for one. While it's now under the miscellaneous tab, there was one glitch among the myriad used which warranted a category split. It was SBA, which of course is short for skee ball abuse. Duh. In BFBB, a lot of the game revolves around collecting spatulas, which unlock new areas and whatnot. 8 of these can be bought from Mr. Krabs, rather than found, but for enough currency that it's unrealistic to get more than one in a speedrun. Unless, of course, you can get 900 currency per second by sticking a skee ball where it registers as going through the ring over and over and over. The early spatulas changed the route drastically, which had the effect of skipping a lot of the difficult and interesting techniques the speed game had become known for. Runners had worked long and hard to perfect these strategies, so to see a lot of it go out the window thanks to a faster route with a lower skill ceiling was understandably frustrating. Any% is still the more popular category, but Any% no SBA will be there for any veterans who preferred the experience running Any% used to be. The decision making here was not based on how the run compared to how the game is played casually, it's very different at this point, but how the run compared to its own previous iterations. Speedrunning BFBB has become an entirely new game in a sense, sharing a disc with the original but little of the intended skill set. And the community wouldn't have it any other way. They'll keep cruise boosting and elbowing and one-frame triple jumping until the game is broken even further. There's one last category to look at, speed games that have no restrictions whatsoever. One such game is Kirby's Dream Land for the original Game Boy. Kirby is both easy to draw and typically easy to play. KDL is simple, and it really hasn't been broken. There are some minor glitches utilized, but it's blink and you'll miss it stuff like this background glitch, which saves just a bit of time with lag reduction. Removing glitches in this case would only marginally change the run, so why bother? Kirby may be a straightforward run, but there are plenty of games with no glitch-based restrictions which are decidedly not so. Sonic is all about going fast, and when you go fast, you end up in places you weren't supposed to be. In Sonic Adventure DX, walls are merely a suggestion, and so is pretty much everything else. Runners have twisted and turned each of its levels into something almost unrecognizable. But all they were really doing was finding the fastest track to the goal ring, which is what you were always supposed to do. Finding shortcuts is one of the most exciting aspects of playing Sonic, and this just takes it to the extreme. No attempt has been made, as far as I'm aware, to create a glitchless or no major skips category, because what they found still works for the community. It doesn't betray the spirit of Sonic Adventure, nor the aspects of speedrunning the game that they've come to embrace. It's glitched, but not too glitched. And now we get to the big one. Ocarina of Time is one of the most iconic and important video games of all time. A cornerstone of so many childhoods, it has been played and replayed and replayed countless times in the 22 years since its release. Even today, it holds up as a spectacular achievement in world building, level design, soundtrack, and so much more. Technically, however, the game isn't exactly flawless. The more you play, the more you start to notice things not working exactly how they should, interactions between objects producing odd results. Cracks begin to show in the masterpiece. Now, what would happen if you peered through those cracks to see what's on the other side? OOT runs were my first exposure to speedrunning way back in the day, and that's true for a lot of people. Skipping from the Deku Tree straight to the final battle was inconceivable. The game we knew and loved was there was Link, Zelda, Ganon, the areas we'd come to know so well, or at least two of them, but understanding how these runners were playing the game was like trying to read an alien language. I remember wondering at the time if there was a way to speedrun the game without that level of technical literacy. Well, currently any percent speedruns are as impressive as they've ever been, every non-cutscene second packed with wild tricks and razor-sharp movement. And there have been huge developments to the route just earlier this year. It's still the most popular category, but far from the only one. Among the other major ones are 100%, which is an even better showcase of the game's glitch potential than any percent, GSR, or Ganondorf's source requirement, which bans a handful of exploits and requires that the items needed to kill Ganon be obtained naturally, and glitchless. A complete spectrum from glitched to the core to relying only on intended methods. Each step along it is rife with competition and optimization, each a new game in and of itself. So I asked the glitchless record holder and all-around legend Danny B if he felt that speedrunning Ocarina of Time still felt like playing Ocarina of Time. My opinion of what it means to feel like you're playing the game has heavily diverged from a normal person's at this point. To me, Ocarina of Time is its glitches, as much as it is its story or its dungeons. The beauty of speedrunning this game is how well the glitches complement natural gameplay, and the incredible community surrounding the game continues to push the envelope with new discoveries all the time. OOT speedrunning is dynamic and beautiful and fun no matter what you're running. The cracks in the masterpiece do not tarnish it. Rather, they make it three-dimensional. So, how glitched is too glitched? It depends. It depends on how easily the original game responds to being played fast. It depends on how many glitches are discovered and how comprehensively they affect the way the game is run. It depends on how difficult or inconsistent those glitches happen to be. It depends even on the personalities and opinions of people who happen to be in leadership positions in the community. It depends on a multitude of different factors. The way a game is speedrun can fit into several different archetypes, but which one in particular just can't be predicted by looking at the original game, or any variable for that matter. Trying to come up with a widely applicable answer to how glitched is too glitched is just like trying to say anything definitive about the hobby as a whole. You can't. Other than one thing, though, and this is just my opinion, that it's fucking dope. The form a speedrunning community, or even an individual run, takes may seem strange from the outside, but there's always a laundry list of reasons as to why it ended up that way. However, let's revisit our original example. Is any % no wrong warp in Super Mario Bros. 3 too glitched? Well, according to the majority of runners, no, not at all, but according to Jugo Mega, yeah, it is. Both of these opinions are equally valid. The official leaderboard for the game crystallizes the majority's viewpoint, but it is not the be-all end-all. In the end, speedrunning isn't about rule sets and category names, but rather about experiencing games in new ways that are interesting to you. And there's no limit to where or how far you can take it. Hey everyone, thanks for watching, of course. This one was supposed to come out by the end of 2019 at the latest, but clearly that didn't quite materialize. As a result, some aspects of it might be a tad out of date given that the script is so old, so feel free to correct anything in the comments. If you like this video, the most important thing you can do to help me out is share it on Twitter, Reddit, put it in your speedrunning discords, text it to your grandparents, you know. Like and subscribe as well if you feel so inclined. You can also find me on Twitter, Twitch, and Discord. I've been Skyhoppers, and I'll see you in the next one. Which, I promise, will come sooner than this one did.